We'll jump into today's episode right after this announcement. For over 13 years, something remarkable has been happening. Rural hospitals and other small healthcare organizations that have partnered with Capstone have been achieving results and forming workplace cultures that even we are blown away by. It is truly a game changer when rural hospitals are the provider of choice and employer of choice so they can keep care local and margins strong. Far more healthcare organizations need to experience what's possible. That's why we're stepping forward in a bigger way, expanding our team of experts, expanding our capabilities by adding a strategic planning division to expand our ability to help even more rural hospitals and other healthcare organizations in 2026 and beyond. Capstone will continue to be the partner that small healthcare organizations can count on to meet them where they're at and guide them towards a stronger future. You can learn more at capstoneleadership.net.
It's just a really structured and easy to follow way to share the data with the team and then sit back and hear the team's ideas for what do we do with this data now. I always like to say, as a leader, be the last to speak. And what that really means is share the data and then sit back and let them come up with the ideas, because that's where ownership really comes from, is when you can celebrate them for coming up with the ideas.
Welcome to Culture Change RX, the podcast for healthcare professionals that are committed to creating a thriving workplace culture, improving the experiences of employees and patients, and ultimately unlocking their organization's next level of potential. I'm Sue Tetzlaff, your host and co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. Join me and my insightful guests each week as we share actionable insights for navigating the crucial people side of the business of healthcare. Subscribe now for a weekly dose of Culture Change RX. Now let's dive into this week's conversation where culture change takes center stage.
Glad you're here for another episode of Culture Change RX. It is me, Sue Tetzlaff, co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions and host of Culture Change RX. And today I have one of our coaching team members, actually a leader of our coaching team, Courtney, here with us today. And so we have a topic we want to focus on today about creating a data-driven culture. And so we're going to have a conversation around that. But first, I want you to get to know a little bit more about Courtney. So Courtney, welcome. And could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're up to, and let people understand a little bit more about your ability to focus on a topic like data-driven culture.
You, Sue, and I'm so excited to be back with the podcast today. So my name is Courtney Kloehn. I am the Chief Transformation Officer with Capstone Leadership Solutions. But before that, I've spent my career in rural healthcare. So over 20 years in rural healthcare. I was the Vice President of Professional Services and Compliance Officer for a critical access hospital before coming to Capstone Leadership Solutions. And what I will say is that all of my work had a data component to it. And so I really began to understand how impactful data-driven decision-making can be to move your organization, your division, your department from good to great to even greater. That leap is much more difficult when we're not tying it to the true data, the patient experience, the employee experience. And so I'm really excited to bring this topic today because this really is how we coach our partner organizations as well to be data-driven in all of the work that they're doing. And so, Sue, I'll pass it back over to you, but I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. And I love having our coaching team on the podcast because there's just such experience and depth in our team. And I love being able to showcase that. And today we've decided to focus on this topic because of some work that you did recently with one of our what we call legacy partners. So when a healthcare organization is, years into adopting and refining and optimizing their approach to transformation, they do move on that continuum that you spoke about, good to great, great to even greater. And while a lot of the foundational things that got them there, the framework, the formula, the four systems, it does take a little bit different look at certain things to keep going and keep those results moving higher. And so you were doing some work with one of those partners and working with their employee driven teams to make sure that their action plans are more data driven based on where their organization is right now. So tell me about what's been going on with that and how that went with them and the usefulness of maybe a tool like you created for them to be able to take their teams and their work to a new level given data.
You bet. I would be happy to walk through kind of where this project started and the why behind it. And so, in my previous role in my hospital, I did lead an employee driven team. And one of the things, we were a legacy partner with Capstone Leadership Solutions. And one of the things that I noticed was we got to a point where we were doing really great work. But we were copying and pasting from one year to the next. So we're going to focus on these initiatives, these events. And really that leap from good to great, those are the foundational elements. Those are things like behavior standards, the way we treat each other in the organization, the use of communication boards. But that leap from great to even greater, that requires that we dig into the data. That requires that we understand the unique opportunities facing our organization. And so last fall, I was working with one of our amazing legacy partners, having this conversation for their employee driven teams. We were approaching a visit with this legacy partner, and the question came up from their initiative champion and CEO. How do we help our teams look at data differently? Make sure they're focusing on data and designing their action plans for 2026. And that's when I developed the data-driven initiatives worksheets to be used at the team level, which I'm going to walk through here in a moment. But what I want to encourage you to do, if you don't have employee-driven teams, I want to encourage you to think of this from the lens of your safety committee, from the lens of your compliance committee, any teams within your organization. You want them to be truly data-driven so that not only can they track and trend that the work they're doing is moving the mark the way they expect it to, but they can also identify those unique opportunities along the way. And so, Sue, if this is a good time to do so, I'd love to dive into the worksheet a little bit and walk them through it.
Absolutely. Yeah, great that we can share such detail. And I know we're going to link the worksheet in the show notes. So I know you're going to overview it and help them be able to see the usefulness of it. But we'll also link it so they'll be able to play with it. And like we say, make it yours, make it better. So they could even customize it for their own use.
Yes, every single time. Make it yours, make it better. And one thing that I would like to add before I start walking through this worksheet, because I don't want to cover everything twice that I'm going to cover in the worksheet, but one point to make. Our partner organizations, our legacy partners are at a different place in their journey than our brand new partners. And so this worksheet was designed with the intent that this is being used with a team that has a core understanding of data, of goal setting, of kind of reviewing data. Our newer partner organizations that are new in their transformational journey, we're helping them to get up to speed with what it means to be data driven. And so I did want to give that context that this worksheet is designed to hand it over to a team and have them think through, how are we data driven? How are we using that data? And so with that context, I'll just walk through this step by step so that as you're looking at this worksheet or using it with your team, you kind of have an understanding of what each section means. And so the very first section of this worksheet asks the team. Now, the team lead is bringing this to their team, working with their team on this. And it asks the team to identify what data points support the work that we are doing. So whether that's employee experience data, patient experience, maybe it's fall risk data, maybe it is event evaluations, but what data supports the work of this team? And if the team can't come up with what data supports that work, they need to seek that out. They need to have the conversation of, what is the intent or the objective of our team, and how can we get at data that supports our team? Because that might be the conversation as well. The next part of this worksheet asks the team or instructs the team on what the organization's goals are. And so in the template you're going to see, I've got the common pillars listed there of people, service, quality, growth, and finance. So that's our formula. People plus service plus quality equals growth and finance. But it's important with the worksheet that your organization's strategic pillars be placed there, because you want to make sure that the work of any team in your organization is aligned with the higher level priorities of the organization. And that's what this worksheet does. It challenges the team to understand the strategic priorities and align their efforts to those. The team is then going to brainstorm unique opportunities for improvement based on their specific data. And so if it's an employee experience team, they're going to look at the employee experience data and talk through what are some unique opportunities that the data is suggesting we implement. Same with patient experience data. Now, we always say this, that the negativity screams at you, the positivity only whispers. And so I really like to encourage teams when they're first reviewing this data to remind themselves that data is a gift. Data is always a gift. Hearing those opportunities for improvement is what makes us even better. But also on the flip side of that is coaching teams to understand that we can't make major changes based off of one comment or one point of feedback. We need to make sure that the data that we're making changes or deciding initiatives off of is statistically significant. And so there are some core things that go into this, which is why I said that this worksheet was designed for an organization that has a foundational understanding of data, because those are key points to driving initiatives from the data.
You do bring up a good point there about the data and the fact that sometimes negativity does scream at us, or one comment, one data point kind of screams at us. And it doesn't mean that it may not be something that's important to focus on, but we do see that a lot. And actually, that can be a thing that can happen early on too, where a team is just getting used to using data. And that's a common thing that happens there, but it also can reoccur later on at this point as well. So this isn't just a problem later on. This can be a problem the whole way through, no matter how data savvy your team gets to be.
Exactly. Well, and it just shows how passionate the team is for their work. You know, when those opportunities for improvement sting a little bit sometimes, it just shows how passionate they are for their work. And so always seeing it as a gift, and what can we learn from this is the lens you want to look at that through. And so then on the back of the worksheet is a grid that allows the teams to insert their unique ideas. So what is the opportunity that you identified from the data you're looking at? What is the supporting data point that suggests this is an important opportunity for your team? And then they'll circle the strategic pillar that it aligns with, because again, we always want these teams, your teams, to be docking up to strategic pillars to be able to make that leap from great to even greater. And then what unique action item will the team tackle to achieve the new opportunity that's been identified in the data? And so it's just a section where they can outline each of the opportunities that are jumping off the data page at them, and then narrow the focus to what's going to be the highest and best use of our resources in the upcoming year. And so this worksheet is really intended to be a collaborative, conversational activity at any team level to be able to talk through what's the data, how does our team strategically align, and what are our unique opportunities, so that we're not just hitting copy and paste each year, but we're actually elevating each year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know what you're speaking to, just, baked into this worksheet is that one, it's a tool for the team, which we talk about the 4 systems of execution. This is how we team around here. This is how we lead around here. This is how we change around here. This is how we achieve around here. And so this is really a team tool, which supports that system. It also speak so much to change, right? PDSA or any change process where we evaluate data, we set aims or goals for data, and we're very thoughtful about what we're going to change and what's the highest priority thing to change, and or if we've made change, is the data showing it's working and how much more is left to do. And then also the achieve is the goal cycle. So you mentioned, really what's in there too is a reflection on the organization specific goals and priorities, and the purpose of the team that aligns with that goal, and maybe their next things to work on that are data driven, that align with their team's purpose, but also with those organization goals. So really one simple worksheet really helps to be a tool for multiple systems that really support great execution. And that's what's needed to move on that continuum of good to great, great to even greater. So you mentioned this is a tool that you developed really with legacy partner and all legacy partners really in mind. And with that partner, how did that go? Like introducing a new way to look at what they're very familiar with doing to be able to help them make each year better than anyone before for their team.
Yeah. So I was super proud of this partner's employee driven teams, because once I provided this worksheet to their IC and their CEO, they sent it to the teams and the teams just really ran with this. And what can happen if you don't have a tool like this, or you don't have that data mindset, that data background, is your results are going to plateau. You get to a point where, we talk about that achieve engine, and being a legacy partner, they understand each of those engines of execution. And we talk about that achieve engine. And if we stop monitoring the data and we don't set SMART goals, even at the team level, the team should have SMART goals as well. We are going to see a plateau in our results, because again, that copy and paste only works from good to great. When you're going from great to even greater, there are going to be things that are common each year that carry forward that the teams are really passionate about.
Yeah.
And they made note of that on their action plans. But it was diving into the data that helped them see, let's try this next year. Or maybe that event that we've done for the last 10 years isn't yielding the same results anymore. That I used this worksheet with another legacy partner, not the one that it was designed for, but another one. And what they found out was their team was really passionate about the summer event they had, but they had maybe 15, 20 people attending that event. And so for all the time and energy they were putting into it, the evaluation data told them this isn't the highest and best use of our time next year. And so that's really what you want to see, is not only identifying new opportunities, but it's also going to help the teams to say, is this working? Is this achieving what we had set out to achieve, or what it once did? And that's really that leap from great to even greater.
Yeah. Last year at our annual event that we call the Healthcare Executive Forum, which is another event that we do each year for executives around the country. Some of them are our partners, but some are not. The focus was on high reliability, just culture, and psychological safety. And one of the things we talked about there, I was reminded of that when you were talking about these, real mature teams that are at that higher end of great to even greater, is it gets harder as you go higher. Like some people think that when your scores and your culture and these kind of things, your systems are really maybe ineffective or not getting traction, and your results are poor, declining, or maybe just good, fair, or okay, is that you think that that's the hard point to be at, to make that shift and turn things around and get them moving up. But, our work time and time again over the last 14 years with dozens of organizations is, I don't want to say it's easy, but the pathway there is pretty predictable. It's not cookie cutter, but the approach customized for each organization is pretty predictable and actually quite swift and sustainable when done right in the ways that our partners have been able to do this. But once you get at that higher end of greatness, inching out those last percentiles or defects or finding those next opportunities really does turn you into a detective. And data is one of the things you need, is to be able to use data as one of the things you use as a detective, decide where do we focus, know if what you're working on is working, or if you still have opportunities to optimize one of the foundational things. Usually they're in pockets, right? It's not like a widespread issue anymore. And sometimes we think because these are organization-wide teams that we're talking about here, employee-driven organization-wide teams, the pockets might start to be individual departments, or they might be on a night shift or with all new employees. Those pockets may not be like in the beginning where it's a really widespread, almost organization-wide opportunity to fix something.
Absolutely. Well, and when you had said that, it made me think of one of our partner organizations who's a few years in now. And within the first couple of years, I think it was 18 months, they saw that leap in their employee engagement from the 20th percentile to the 90th percentile from rolling out those foundational things. And so that leap from good to great, a lot of that is low hanging fruit. A lot of that is just rolling out the foundation. And great to even greater is exactly what you're saying here, Sue, which is we need to get really real with the data. We need to become detectives. And, sometimes I think that I know that I did this over a decade ago when I was just starting to learn data driven decision making. I would always go to what's the lowest scoring item, patient experience. The lowest scoring item, only to find out that the lowest scoring item was our parking. We couldn't do a lot about the parking. And even if we could, that wasn't driving likelihood to recommend. And so that's another area where you become a detective, yes, but you have to challenge, is that a driver of what you're trying to achieve? And it's always the driver of what you're trying to achieve.
And you're speaking of this worksheet and this level of data use at a pretty high level of a team that's been established. They've got some core success with improvement that is data driven. They have some core understanding. But I also see this at a local level for an individual leader. Like I was thinking when I was a chief nursing officer and we had gotten through that good to great and we were embarking upon the great to even greater. And each of my department leaders, nurse managers would work with their department staff each year to also align goals to those organization goals and figure out, for our specific department, where are unique opportunities. And in the beginning, they were pretty obvious and they were low hanging fruit and they were things that were pretty foundational. But again, as we move there, this level of data use and detectiveness and using data to pinpoint things that may not be as obvious that are right for us right now, it would be applicable there too. So, like you said at the beginning, this tool could be modified for use in all sorts of improvement teams, but also it could be used for even that goal cycle, action plan, goal setting at the department level too, in real mature organizations. Pausing here to get healthcare executives excited about Capstone's 14th annual Healthcare Executive Forum. Many small and rural healthcare organizations are operating under conditions that naturally strain margins, workforce stability, and long-term competitiveness. Strength today requires more than perseverance. It requires intentional design and doing. And that's why the focus of our Healthcare Executive Forum this year is on designing the future. It's all about where strategic clarity meets execution certainty. This isn't just another conference or networking event. This is where rural healthcare executives learn how to lead their organizations to true organizational vitality. If your plan or your ability to execute it is in question, if progress feels incremental instead of transformational, it may be time for a trajectory changing strategic period. Be a leader in rural healthcare's new era, the era of organizational vitality. Register now and bring your executive team. It is true that the next 3 years may be the most defining period your organization has faced in decades. Visit capstoneleadership.net and click on upcoming events. See you in June in Madison.
Absolutely. I would have loved a tool like this for our quarterly division meetings when I was the vice president, to have had a tool like this for the directors to use in department meetings. And so it's just a really structured and easy to follow way to share the data with the team and then sit back and hear the team's ideas for what do we do with this data now. I always like to say, as a leader, be the last to speak. And what that really means is share the data and then sit back and let them come up with the ideas, because that's where ownership really comes from, is when you can celebrate them for coming up with the ideas.
And what's just fascinates me is that the work that we do with these teams and the leaders at this level of transformation, it just reminds me about how possible it is. I think that sometimes when organizations are starting out and they're looking at results that maybe don't compare well with others, or they're trending year after year in a way that's unfavorable, and they're just not sure what's possible. And what I love is, especially because we work small and rural healthcare organizations where we often feel like maybe some of the things that big organizations can do just aren't available to us. But I just love the proof that our partners are providing about what is possible in success in and the culture of small and rural healthcare organizations.
Absolutely. Well, and it makes me think back to when we started our partnership at my organization over a decade ago with Capstone. And it wasn't that our teams weren't doing great work. We had great people in the organization doing great work, but we weren't aligned in the work that we were doing. We didn't have strategic focus in the work that we were doing. And so once we've referred to it as the Achieve Engine several times here today, once we understood that Achieve Engine and we could bring some clarity around these are the strategic priorities, here's the data that supports those. Let's all work in alignment with those strategic priorities. That's where you really start to see momentum build for clear transformation.
Yeah, yeah. For those organizations that maybe are earlier, not quite ready for a worksheet or a tool like this, while I've got you here, any insights? Because I know you've been also coaching our newest partners that are just starting. And one of the things that I know that we do right on the first year action plans for an employee driven team is one of the things that we put in front of them is this challenge to really get to know their data and start being the team that can work with data to guide their action plans and validate that their work is making a difference. So, any words of wisdom for those on that earlier end of the spectrum of becoming data-driven teams or organizations?
You bet. And so when I go to visit our new partner organizations for their visit one, we talk about data while I'm there. I talk about data with every single team. But with the steering team, which is the kind of the leadership of these transformational journeys, one of the things I coach the steering teams to understand is, one, the teams need to have access to their data. And so if you've got a data person in the organization that can help them get access, if you work with a vendor that you've got a great contact with that vendor, they can help do some training, that can take some of that load off the organization. And so that works really well. But the next part is the part that I always want to really send home, which is help narrow the focus for these teams. Because if you just drown them in every bit of raw employee experience data or patient experience data you have, that your journey's too new. It's too early for that. And I don't recommend that at any stage of any journey, that you just give all the data that's available for their team's objectives, but really understanding the work they're doing, the focus they're going to have. And so if your employee experience team is working on communication, grab the communication indicators from the employee experience data. If your patient experience team is working on first impressions walking into the building, grab that data from the patient experience surveys, because otherwise you can get too overwhelmed. And so when you're newer and introducing your teams or even your department to data, be really thoughtful about what data you're providing. You want to be transparent with data, but you also want to understand that it can be too much. It can be very overwhelming at first. And so that's really the approach that we take, is making sure there's someone available who can get the data to the teams or train them how to get the data. But then how do you narrow the data focus to be really relevant to what the teams are working on?
That's such good advice, Courtney. And, it really makes me think about the fact that sometimes, we have so much data that it is overwhelming and stressful even and confusing. And you bring up a good point about the vendors as well. If you are using a survey vendor, which you probably are for, patient satisfaction, maybe for employee engagement as another example. And sometimes at that later point, that more mature point, like we were talking about with the worksheet, our vendors may have a lot of ways to slice and dice and interpret statistically, the validity, but also the priority of data. And sometimes that's another good opportunity to tap your vendor on the shoulder and say, this is where we're specifically at right now. Because a lot of times what the vendor is doing in their general role of educating organizations to use the data they're providing, it's pretty broad sweeping across all levels of organizations. But once you get to this level, you probably have to have a very specific conversation with your vendor to say, this is where we're at, and this is what we need the data to tell us.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I love, so we use the same vendor for patient experience and employee experience. And there's a lot of overlap. If you work on, trust and teamwork between departments, that's going to reflect over in your patient experience data as well as your employee experience data. And so once we kind of had our feet under us, we reached that legacy status in our transformational journey. Our vendor actually worked internally. There was a different representative for each one, and they helped us identify where does the data overlap so we could get the biggest bang for our buck, in a sense, where we could work on these initiatives and they're going to drive both surveys. And so really making sure, and our vendor was excited to do that because, again, Sue, like you said, there's a lot of work that's just repetitive work that we do with our vendors. They help send us reports. I had a monthly check-in with our vendor, but they really enjoyed that kind of that collaborative work of, let's do a deep dive. Let's see what your data is actually saying. And so that was really helpful, in addition to them doing some great training for our leadership team on how to analyze data, because you have to start somewhere, and they were our experts.
Yeah. And, you also mentioned that not everyone has to be the expert in data. You just need to have that expertise available to your team. And so while we see the savviness of these team members related to the use of data really evolve over time, it doesn't mean that they all have to become experts in the data. They just have to have access to those experts. Yeah.
They need to have access to it. And I would also say that it doesn't have to be the team lead or even the department leader that takes ownership over gathering the data. A lot of times we see a team member who's a very analytical team member and they want to own it. And that is fabulous. Or a team member in your department that wants to own the data and have that conversation at the department meetings. And that is fabulous. We always say, lead our teams to the line of leadership. That's another way that can happen.
This whole topic reminds me of an on-site visit I did quite a few years ago, but also with a very great organization that was at that higher end of greatness. And they had done the work to get themselves there. They had made that transition of good to great. They were in the great to even greater. And I remember coming on site and just doing a focus group with providers, leaders, and employees, just, clinical, non-clinical. Some had been there 3 days, some had been there 30 years. They were from, just a real diverse group of people in this focus group. And I just, did a warm-up question to get the group talking. And I just started with, a basic question of, what's going well here? And 80% of what employees, leaders, providers talked about was data. they were talking about, we have a goal to improve this in our department and we're going to meet that. Or did you see that the organization that we're trending to meet all 5 of our goals this year? And I mean, like the 80% of the conversation, just to a basic question, what's going well here, was related to data improvement and results. They really were talking like winners, like a winning organization, and they could not just feel it, but they could speak to it in numbers. And many of the people in this room weren't even on official improvement teams for the organization. They were just impacted by the work, either through department goals and or being part of the organization that was on a transformational journey that used this approach. So I just love thinking back to that session and how it hit me about where they had started and now where they were in that moment.
I love hearing that because that's so incredibly impactful. I know one of my favorite things as a senior leader was when I would round through departments and I just ask a staff member, hey, can you show me your communication board? And they would get so excited to talk me through what they were working on as a department for their goal cycle and the pieces that they were working on and where they stood for that, because our communication boards all had the goal reporting on them as well. They were also metric boards, but just seeing that ownership, I was so grateful to be a part of that moment with those staff members, because hearing that ownership and that accountability and that excitement, that just connects back to most employee experience surveys have a question of the work I'm doing impacts the future vision or impacts the strategic priorities. And those team members knew the impact they were making on those strategic priorities. So yes, it is so exciting when you ask a question and it's data, it's aligned, the staff feel it, the leaders feel it. Mm-hmm. That is a legacy partner through and through for us because they're on the higher end of that transformational journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We use a lot of sports analogies sometimes in our work. High performing organizations can be very much like high performing sports teams, and sports teams, they keep score, right? They keep stats, and there's a reason for that at an individual level, but also at a team level. So, what is the score of the game, but also what's our win-loss record? What are all the individual stats about contributions to that record? So, and where's our opportunity? Do we have to improve in this area or that? And the data really drives that. And so it really is not much different, is it?
No. And we're human beings, so we're competitive. So it's just one of those things.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up on this great conversation here today, Courtney, is there anything else you wanted to share with our audience before we close?
You bet. I just want to reinforce that data empowers your teams. And so if your teams don't currently have access to data, or if you're a department leader and you're not regularly taking your department's data to your staff meetings, just start. That's always our mantra. Just start, because data empowers teams, and that empowerment is what creates ownership on your teams. And all leaders want to see ownership on their teams.
Great advice, Courtney. Thank you. Thanks again for being here. Sure enjoy these episodes with you. And for those that maybe have missed prior episodes with Courtney, we'll link those up to the show notes too, so you can hear more from Courtney and some of the past conversations we've had as well. Thanks for being here, Courtney.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Great. Thank you. Bye now.
Thanks for tuning in to Culture Change RX. If you found value in today's episode and you are a believer in fostering change in healthcare, join us in making a difference. Follow, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. Share it with colleagues and your network. Together, we can make a lasting impact. Until next week, keep inspiring positive change.